In the early morning hours of May 14th, 2008, a 19-year-old college student called his parents from a dark rural road in Minnesota. His name was Brandon Swanson. He told them his car had slid into a ditch after taking a gravel road home from a party. He could not see any nearby towns, only fields and darkness surrounded him. His parents began driving toward the area while staying on the phone with him. For nearly 40 minutes, Brandon walked along the road while describing what he could see. He believed he was approaching the lights of a nearby town. Then, in the middle of the call, Brandon suddenly reacted to something. He said just 2 words, "Oh shit." In 2008, Brandon Swanson was a freshman at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. He was studying wind energy technology. Friends described him as responsible and independent. He often helped his parents on their farm. Brandon lived with his parents in the small town of Marshall, Minnesota. The area was surrounded by farmland and quiet rural roads. On the evening of May 13, 2008, Brandon attended a small party with friends. The gathering took place in the town of Canby. Canby was about 30 miles from his home in Marshall. The party lasted into the late evening hours. At some point after midnight, Brandon decided to head home. He left alone in his green Chevrolet Lumina. The route home required driving through a network of rural gravel roads. These roads crossed large areas of farmland. Street lighting was extremely limited in the area. Many of the roads looked nearly identical at night. Shortly after leaving the party, Brandon's car left the road. The vehicle slid into a shallow ditch. The car was not severely damaged, but it could not be driven out of the ditch. Brandon stepped out and looked around. It was dark and quiet. There were no nearby houses in sight. Brandon believed he knew where he was. Brandon thought he had driven near the town of Lind. Lind was only a short distance from Marshall. Confident he could walk to town, he called his parents. He told them his car was stuck, but he was not injured. His parents immediately left home to pick him up. They stayed on the phone with Brandon as they drove. He began walking along the gravel road toward what he believed were nearby town lights. At that moment, the situation still seemed manageable, but investigators later discovered Brandon was not where he thought he was. Brandon remained on the phone with his parents as he began walking. They tried to determine exactly where he was. Brandon believed he was near the town of Lind. His parents drove toward Lind while speaking with him. But as they searched the roads, they could not find him. They passed several gravel intersections while Brandon described what he saw. The descriptions did not match the area around Lind. At the time, none of them realized Brandon had misjudged his location. He was actually many miles away. While walking, Brandon said he could see distant lights ahead. He believed those lights belonged to Lind. His parents continued driving in that direction, but every road they checked appeared empty. Brandon kept walking through the darkness. He crossed gravel roads and moved through open farmland. Occasionally, he mentioned passing farm fields and fences. The terrain was uneven and difficult to see at night. Still, the phone call remained connected. For nearly 40 minutes, the conversation continued. His parents reassured him they were getting closer. Brandon remained calm and focused on walking. He believed he was approaching the town lights. At one point, he stepped off the road and began crossing a field. He hoped this shortcut would bring him closer to town. Tall grass and uneven ground surrounded him. The area was extremely dark.
Then, something unexpected happened. Brandon suddenly reacted to something in front of him. His parents heard him shout a single phrase. He said, "Oh shit." The phone line remained open, but Brandon stopped responding. Brandon's parents immediately began calling his name through the phone. There was no response. The line was still connected, but Brandon was no longer speaking. They listened carefully for any sound. For a moment, they thought they could hear movement. Then the line went quiet. The call eventually disconnected. Brandon's parents kept trying to call him back. Each attempt went straight to voicemail. They continued driving the rural roads looking for him, but they could not find the location Brandon had described. As the night passed, concern quickly turned into fear. By early morning, Brandon had still not been found. His parents contacted local authorities. A search began in the area where they believed Brandon had been walking. Investigators initially focused near the town of Lind, but the search produced no results. Later that day, Brandon's car was located. It was found near the town of Taunton. This location was nearly 20 miles away from where Brandon believed he was. His green Chevrolet Lumina was sitting in a shallow ditch beside a gravel road. The car showed no signs of a crash. It appeared to have simply slid off the road. There were no obvious clues inside the vehicle. Brandon's wallet was found in the car, but Brandon himself was gone. The discovery revealed that the entire phone call had taken place in the wrong search area. Investigators now had to start over. The last known location of Brandon Swanson had shifted miles away.
Brandon's parents continued calling his phone after the line went silent. Each call went straight to voicemail. They kept driving through the rural roads, hoping to see him walking somewhere along the fields, but the roads remained empty. As the sun began to rise, Brandon had still not been found. His parents contacted local law enforcement. Authorities quickly began organizing a search of the surrounding area. At first, investigators focused near the town of Lind. That was the location Brandon believed he was near during the phone call. Search teams drove the nearby gravel roads. Volunteers began scanning farm fields and roadside ditches, but no sign of Brandon was found. The area described during the phone call did not match the roads around Lind. Investigators began to suspect Brandon had misidentified his location. Later that day, a new discovery shifted the investigation. Brandon's car was located near the small town of Taunton, Minnesota. This location was nearly 20 miles from Lind. The green Chevrolet Lumina was sitting in a shallow ditch beside a gravel road. The vehicle appeared undamaged. It looked as if the car had simply slid off the road. Inside the vehicle, investigators found Brandon's wallet. There were no signs of a struggle. Nothing inside the car appeared disturbed. The discovery revealed Brandon had been walking in an entirely different area. Search teams immediately shifted their efforts toward the Taunton location. The surrounding land consisted of farmland, drainage ditches, and narrow gravel roads. Searchers began combing the fields where Brandon might have been walking, but the terrain made the search extremely difficult. Deep ditches, tall grass, and waterways ran through the farmland. Investigators believed Brandon may have encountered one of these hazards in the dark. Despite extensive searching, no trace of Brandon Swanson was found. Investigators expanded the search area around Taunton in the days that followed. Dozens of volunteers joined law enforcement officers in the effort. Search teams walked mile after mile of farmland. They inspected drainage ditches and creek beds running through the fields. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the landscape. Tracking dogs were also brought in to assist.
The dogs followed Brandon's scent from his vehicle. The trail led away from the road and into nearby farmland. For a period of time, the scent trail continued across open fields. Search teams followed the same path Brandon likely walked during the phone call. Eventually, the dogs reached the edge of the Yellow Medicine River. At that location, the scent trail stopped. Investigators considered the possibility that Brandon had fallen into the river. Search teams began focusing heavily on the surrounding waterways. Divers searched sections of the river and nearby drainage channels. The water levels were low during that time of year, but the riverbanks were steep and muddy. Investigators believed it would have been difficult to climb out in the dark. Despite repeated searches, nothing was found in the water. No clothing, phone, or personal items were recovered. As weeks passed, the search area continued to grow. Farmers allowed investigators to search across private land. Large sections of farmland were combed multiple times. Still, there was no trace of Brandon Swanson. The disappearance had become one of the most puzzling cases in the region. Authorities were left with very few clues. The last confirmed moment remained the phone call with his parents and the final words they heard in the darkness. As the investigation continued, several theories began to emerge. One possibility involved the Yellow Medicine River near the scent trail. Investigators believed Brandon may have fallen into the water while walking in the dark. The river passed through the farmland where the dogs had tracked his path. At night, the riverbanks would have been difficult to see. Some sections were steep and muddy. If Brandon slipped, climbing out could have been difficult. However, repeated searches of the river did not locate him. Another theory suggested Brandon may have been injured somewhere in the fields. The farmland terrain contained deep drainage ditches and uneven ground. Tall grass could easily hide a person from view. Search teams returned to the same fields multiple times. Despite this effort, nothing was discovered. Investigators also considered the possibility that Brandon had become disoriented. The rural road network in that area can be confusing at night. Many gravel roads appear identical. Without landmarks, it is easy to misjudge direction. This may explain why Brandon believed he was near Lind. Phone records later confirmed he had actually been walking near Taunton. His misunderstanding of location complicated the search. Authorities also examined the possibility of foul play, but there was no evidence suggesting another person was involved. No suspicious vehicles were reported in the area. No witnesses reported seeing anyone else near Brandon's car. The timeline of the phone call left very little opportunity for outside involvement. Investigators ultimately concluded that Brandon likely encountered an environmental hazard, but without physical evidence, the exact cause remains unknown. Years later, the case remains unresolved. Brandon Swanson's disappearance continues to raise unanswered questions. In the years following Brandon Swanson's disappearance, investigators continued reviewing the case. Search teams returned to the farmland area multiple times. Each search produced the same result. No trace of Brandon was found. The mystery surrounding his final moments remained unresolved. His parents continued to search for answers. They worked closely with investigators and volunteers. The case received national attention over time. Brandon's disappearance also led to changes in Minnesota law. In 2009, the state passed what became known as Brandon's Law. The law allows authorities to immediately trace the location of a cell phone during a missing person emergency. Before this law, investigators often had to wait for court approval. The delay could cost valuable time during a search. Brandon's case demonstrated how critical location data can be. Today, Brandon's law is used when people go missing in dangerous circumstances. Despite these changes, Brandon's case itself remains unsolved. No confirmed sightings have ever been reported. No physical evidence has been discovered. The farmland where Brandon vanished has been searched repeatedly. Investigators still believe the answer lies somewhere in that rural landscape. More than a decade later, Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains one of Minnesota's most puzzling cases. His final words are still remembered by those closest to him. A single moment in the darkness, a phone call that ended without explanation, and a young man who simply vanished.